much, Jeff. Yeah.
I think next time I'll keep going.
Do gather in. Plenty of room at the front. Yeah. Well, it puts it back a bit. Yeah, let's move this table.
Hello, baby. Did you see the puppet? You saw the puppet?
Just put it there to stop it.
And what did the puppet do? Come and tell me. Come and tell me all about the puppet. Was it a little puppet?
Okay, well I think we better start really because I can smell the food preparing and it's smelling quite good. So,
also, we're very slightly early for food, so maybe just over half an hour. Jeremy says he's running a tad early, so yeah.
But anyway, we were having a debate yesterday about who NASA is a little bit and whether it's for producers as well as or what. And generally it's sort of isn't, although it's not exclusive, but it is more kind of artist, collective, union-y thing, I don't know. But we did, I just always remember back to a conversation we had an earlier For the Love of It, where Michelle Walker came. She just got a job, I think, at Hat Fair. And she just sort of introduced herself and what she was trying to do there. And we just had there was just like an open conversation about the different perspectives, I suppose, of promoters, producers, and artist companies. And it was, you know, we're all in the same field, and we think we know what we do, but it's always good to see from other people's points of view as to where things have come from and what we actually need to do to get things better. So when we have this opportunity, I think, to talk a little bit with you about Without Walls and sort of, I mean, there's a lot of difficult things happening in the economy and in the shrinking of resources in local authorities and things like that going on. So it's just it's worth really talking a bit about what. Well, maybe you should put the Without Walls into context a bit and talk about how it's come about.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to come and sort of have a conversation with you, because I think which came about because I met with Garth a couple of months ago, and I think we were having quite an open conversation about your own projects, and also you were telling me about your involvement in For the Love of It. And at the time, it was just around the time when Without Walls, which I'll talk about a little bit in a moment, had just announced some of the programming decisions for the 2018 programme, and there were a lot of artists that had put in proposals that hadn't been successful, as well as a smaller number who put in proposals who were successful. of which there are probably people from both sides in this room. And we were talking about Garth was talking about the artist's perspective on, you know, that the significance now, I suppose, of Without Walls, and we thought that it might be useful to have a conversation like this here. So, in terms of what Without Walls is, I mean, it started in 2007 as a group of 5 festivals who started working together to commission work, and that very much, at the time that came about, it came out of a meeting of a number of festivals that had kind of met very much in a kind of crisis situation, because it was just after Streets Ahead, the feast event that used to take place in Manchester in Platfields Park, had announced that it wasn't going to be happening anymore, and there were a number of other festivals that had been quite significant festivals that were kind of experiencing quite big financial challenges or were closing, as well as noticing that Arts Council was putting quite a lot of money into some large-scale shows. There'd just been a very big emergency exit arts show that had toured, I think, to only 2 festivals, because actually the festivals hadn't been working together to put their joint investment into the same projects, or to enable the bigger scale projects to kind of really get off the ground. So after a number of years of sort of, you know, debating taking the temperature of where the Arts Council was with that, really, there were 5 festivals that then got together to start working as a consortium that ended up being called Without Walls, and that started with Stockton, Greenwich, Hat Fair in Winchester, Streets of Brighton as it was then, and can't remember. Oh yeah, Manchester. We were in Manchester at the time, and then it's grown over the years. So what we have now is a consortium of 10 partners on the commissioning side. 9 partners on the commissioning side, and a further 10 as part of this associate touring network, which is a group of festivals that then take the shows that have been commissioned by Without Walls. And to cut a long story short, from April 2018, after 10 years of commissioning and touring over 125 new projects, Arts Council is going to be supporting Without Walls regularly as a national portfolio organisation, a regularly funded organisation, which is an amazing sort of, you know, step forward, if you like, and a big recognition of the work and the Arts Council's perception, and I think genuinely the real successes of Without Walls over the years. And I think I have to say that as XTRAX, I'm the director of XTRAX, I'm not no longer a commissioning partner. But XTRAX and my colleagues, as an organisation, we are responsible now for the management Without Walls, so we put in that funding application and we're managing the relationships with all of the artists, and we coordinate the meetings and the decision-making of all the festivals. So whilst I can't, I have no decision-making say in any of the artistic decisions that are made. My job and that of my colleagues is to manage that process and make sure that it's done, you know, fairly, and then manage that communication back to the artist. So I'm totally involved in all of that, and so I can't speak on behalf of any of those individual festivals, but I can answer any questions you might have about any of those decisions that are made, how that's communicated back to the artists, if people have got feedback they want to talk about regarding that. But I think I'm here today to take any questions that you might have about any of the Without Walls activity, or any of the Without Walls decisions, or any of that process, and to look at how we could improve that if anyone's got ideas or suggestions. But I think as a new, you know, as a new national portfolio organisation in this kind of elevated position that we will have within the Arts Council's kind of overall portfolio of different companies, all the different companies they work with, we're very conscious that, you know, within our sector, street arts or outdoor arts, whatever you want to call it, you know, this is now a quite a significant organisation, and we absolutely understand that. And I think as such, you know, we want to make sure that we are using that, you know, position to kind of start advocating and pushing forward and representing, you know, the artists' agendas as much as we are the, you know, the other people that are involved in this sector. because, you know, the partners in Without Walls, of course, are festivals, you know. So I'm meeting and consulting very regularly with festivals. It has to be said, the artists always the number of artists we're working with always outnumbers the number of festivals, but obviously it's hard sometimes to see those artists speaking as one coherent voice, you know. And I think no one's expecting, you know, NASA to be able to enable every artist to speak one coherent voice, but this is a great opportunity to, you know, hear some of those voices and opinions and see, you know, really what you think, you know, Without Walls could be doing that would be useful within the context of what it, you know, what it's possible to do. And the reality of it is that, you know, if we receive 150 proposals from artists, you know, for commissions, it's simply not possible to support all of them. But I think, you know, what are, beyond that, what are the other things that we could be doing that would be useful? That's all I should say for now, but...
that sounds good, yeah. So I don't know, I mean, people have got questions and probably experiences.
I don't know Without Walls, it's just how many companies do you support?
Well, for example, this year, so for the 2018 year, we're supporting 13 new projects that we're commissioning, mostly commissioning, and some of them we're not actually giving them commission money. The shows already exist, we're supporting them to tour. And we're also supporting this year 21 R&D companies. And then, so that's the kind of new investment that is going into projects this year. All of this is from UK or British artists. In addition to that, that 21 and 13 projects that we're investing in, and all of those, none of those shows, I don't think any of those shows are completely finished right now. Most of them are kind of in development. Most of them will be premiering in May, June sometime. In addition to that, there'll be a further probably 25 shows that we will be supporting to tour through our associate touring network. So that's the kind of core of our activity.
So if I understand rightly, supporting new work, when you say supporting touring, so you're co-funding touring?
Yes,
yes. Festivals, and who are the festivals? They're your body?
Yeah. So there's 8 festivals and also the 101 Creation Centre. So 9 different organisations that are the decision makers in deciding who we're going to support, and they all put money from their own funds into those projects as well. So they put money in, and Without Walls put some money in it, and that enables us to have a pot of money that we commission from.
I think one of the issues that I've heard kind of raised a bit is about having a kind of level playing field. So one of the fears, or whether, I don't know, you can confirm or not confirm or whatever, say, is one of the fears is that one, it's a small closed world in a way. It's quite a small country that we have, and there's not that many festivals. So in a way that becomes the pond, and within that, within the touring, if some chosen groups are subsidised with the touring, it makes it very difficult for anyone else to get their proper fee that they need to survive without funding. So it really kind of makes a quite sharp line then between the funded ones, the chosen ones, which are only very few, as you say, and the not funded ones. Yeah. And it is within, as we know from this kind of meeting that we have, it's a very broad church. We have people who come from traditional circus, we have people who might bus, we have people like ourselves who have had funding and have bits and bobs of funding, but even we can run up against that, you know, so that we now know if we don't have funding for something, we can't tour it at a subsidised rate. And if all those festivals are the bulk of the, like the street theatre booking festivals, are getting subsidised shows over there, they're not even going to look anywhere else. It's become a little pond that will look in on itself. Yeah, I mean, that's an anxiety.
I hear you, and I think, I mean, what I would say is that all of the Without Walls festivals that are subsidised to, you know, that are commissioning and that are subsidised therefore to have those shows touring, all of them are booking other shows as well. None of them are exclusively only booking Without Walls shows.
But the problem is, and we found it this year and for the 2 years with our other, we're getting an Arts Council fund, our shows are Arts Council funded. So, and it just seems a very weird situation where the Arts Council is funding us to make the show and then is making us difficult. We would expect to do 15 to 20 shows in the first year and the same kind of level, and we're about a third, at least a third of that every year. So, but it just seems mad if they're going to fund some shows and then create an environment where it's not attractive for that. We do get, you know, we're playing in Stockton and Greenwich this year, but
which
it's
is two of the Without Walls
well,
festivals.
yes,
So that's what I mean. I don't.
no, but I mean, it wouldn't
Yeah.
be. It wouldn't be a problem if there were the range of festivals that there used to be, where you could go like that, and if you don't get one year, you might get it the other. But it is a problem.
I understand exactly what you're saying. I really do, and I think it's really important that we enforce that situation where and really always scrutinise the festivals to make sure that they are booking other shows beyond the Without Walls supported shows. But just to say that the Without Walls commissioning festivals are only 8 festivals, and there are many more in the country, and we know that. And those 8 festivals, when they're booking a Without Walls shows, they're booking a show that they haven't seen. You know, so I think we're not. Hopefully, what we're not doing is getting in the way of those shows that, you know, might be in existence and that might be looking for performances. You know, sort of, that the festivals are still going to want to book something that they know that they might have seen that is already there. You know. So, I mean, I'm not trying to say that I don't think it's a problem, but I think there is a bigger problem beyond Without Walls, which is about the shrinkage of the festival network, which is it's not entirely. I don't think that's down to Without Walls, you know.
No.
But it does emphasise it.
I agree, and I think it makes it all the more important that, you know, we're able to have these conversations and that, you know, sort of air those problems and make sure that the feedback to the Arts Council, but it's not just the Arts Council, it's really to the wider sector, and it's an issue of local authorities, etc. That actually Without Walls is not solving the problems of what's going on in the outdoor arts sector. I mean, I also think that there's a bigger thing that our sector, my observation, and it's interesting to see what you guys think about it, I mean, my observation is that I think we've been protected by the bubble of the focus, the political focus at the moment on audiences and audience development, and the Creative People and Places networks and the strategic touring networks, which are all about basically addressing the issues of accessibility of arts and the importance of you know, the arts reaching people who don't otherwise engage with other art forms, where we all know that we're really good at that, or the outdoor festival sector is incredibly good at that. And I do feel that we've been somewhat cushioned by, you know, the sector on the whole has been somewhat cushioned by the fact that whilst there are sort of some major festivals that have sort of, you know, either disappeared or kind of seriously reduced in funding within some local authorities, what I'm seeing, and certainly within our associate touring network, is a lot of Creative People and Places projects, you know, the areas, so new festivals that are actually being, you know, sort of developed, you know, I mean, you know, Appetite and Stoke-on-Trent is one, you know, we've been working with them for the last 6 years, and they didn't exist, you know, a few years ago, but now probably many of you would have thought, you know, had some experience of kind of going there. So I don't know, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying.
So I was just wondering if the solution to this issue is that Without Walls commissions and creates, you know, helps to get new work out there. And yes, I understand that the festivals that are part of that co-commissioning process are investing in that show, so therefore you would imagine that they might not be, they've already paid some money for that show, so you could think about it that way. But then the touring isn't subsidised, because then it's you've seeded the new work, which is great and fantastic, but then it makes it possible, because also, I mean, now, you know, I've come from being a practising artist to a director of a festival, and I'm going, I'd like to get my hands on some of that Without Walls work. Yeah. But then it feels like now, as a festival director, I have to join the Without Walls network because then that might be in my best interest. So coming at it from the other side, I'm just wondering if that's where it does feel that it needs to shift, and it's great work, commissioning work, but perhaps subsidising the festivals is a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that the festivals would say is that why on earth would a festival presents a whole load of shows of, that they haven't seen, that have been collectively commissioned by a group of, 8 other festival directors, and not just them. So I think festival directors will not have any problem, sort of like presenting and commissioning something that they themselves have developed, initiated, or create that relationship with the artists. The thing that Without Walls does to the festival directors is it forces them to have one strand of their programme that has been artistically directed by 8 other people as well as themselves. And that is why the subsidy exists, and that's why I think there needs to be a subsidy. I mean, I think, and I think that's also where the responsibility on Without Walls is to make sure that that subsidy is being used to subsidise work that wouldn't otherwise get presented at that festival, which might mean, a very popular show by a kind of a company that has had, loads and loads of track record and success, and that is clear to be a sort of surefire winner. Is that the right show to be subsidised for Without Walls? It's a subtle thing, isn't it? And there may be people that are in this room who think actually they are very successful companies, and their show is sure to be a surefire success, and they would still like to have that opportunity of the subsidy because they know that it's an incentive for the festival to actually have it at their event. And I've also seen sort of festivals who I know probably wouldn't necessarily choose that show to be at that festival, but are having it because they have made that joint commitment through the Without Walls process to trying to support a particular piece of work. Listen, I'm not trying to sit here and say I think it's a perfect system, though. There's a million different ways you can and there's challenges in what you say, Sue and Edward. I hear you. It's like it does create. Does it create a situation where other artists who aren't supported by the consortium are actually trying to find a way into potentially a proportionately smaller bit of the cake? If some of the cake's already been divided and agreed amongst a certain group of people, then of course I completely understand what you're saying. But on the other hand, does that mean that we shouldn't have that cake there at all? I don't know.
No, it's about systems and being aware and reminding yourself and like auditing from time to time what's going on and analysing and trying to get the consequences.
And can I just say as well, I'm very aware of what you've said. I mean, I'm very aware of it, and we did in the last 6 months we did a discussion a little bit like this at the ISON conference, and we did the discussion at the Voting Disgruntled. You were there, weren't you, Jed? I'm very, very aware of these things, and I promise you, I do take them back to Without Walls, and I try to make sure that we are acting. My role at XTRAX is, and it's not just me, it's much bigger group of people. We see our role as there to try and make sure that we are trying to balance these views and keep an eye on this, sort of this issue at the same time as trying to do what Without Walls says it's going to do, which is do that commissioning. So sorry, I know you.
Okay, my question is about the commission selection criteria.
Yeah.
I mean, what is it that makes you select a certain style or a certain company and not others? And what is that you're looking for, or what is that makes companies receive that support?
It's incredibly open, deliberately extremely broad, and really I would say that the biggest thing really is about it, the objective of Without Walls is meant to be boundary pushing and forward looking in terms of the evolution of the art form, the many art forms that sit within.
What does that mean? That's something I struggle with.
Yeah.
Is that wording, because it can be very confusing. Well, so what is risk taking first? What is
that, of course, that's that's up to the artist to articulate what they believe is that
Yeah.
situation, why they believe that their project is risk-taking or boundary pushing. And then it's up to the festival directors to interpret that and make a decision and assess it in the context of very broad
What
criteria.
happens if the company doesn't know how to articulate it in a written form?
Well, I think
So you don't. So it doesn't say exactly what you want to hear.
I think that I think you should credit the Without Walls directors with being able to interpret and see below.
Oh, yeah, I'm not saying.
Sorry, I didn't mean that in a pointed way. To see below that someone's sophisticated use of language or not. You know, it's not about semantics. It's about the ideas. And I think that I honestly do believe that projects don't get through just because the writer has, you know, is especially skilled in fundraising or has appointed someone kind of, you know, to turn their words or interpret their words into something particularly polished. I honestly don't believe that that's the case. But I think there is a little bit of, and it's also very difficult for me to kind of give an honest answer to that in the sense that I'm not actually, you know, I'm not making decisions. I'm there when these decisions are being made. And there's usually, well, there is a scoring process that is used as a kind of initial filter, and then a very open discussion amongst the directors. And I honestly don't think that people, I would say that I don't think any artist should worry that they are, you know, either not skilled at kind of presenting their ideas in a written form, or that you know, they're not good at spelling, or they're dyslexic, or anything like that. I think the idea, and you know, I think will usually come through. You know, do I agree with all decisions is a different thing, but I wouldn't worry too much about that.
Would you accept other media like video and
Sure.
or drawings and or
Yes.
other?
Okay, sorry, there was another question.
Yeah, so I think I was just wondering what your perspective on sort of emerging artists is as a company. We've been for over 3 years, but we've applied twice, obviously we've been successful, and also then come up against this situation where we're then trying to build momentum for ourselves and tour our own work and coming up against, well, we only book Without Walls, sorry.
By the way, I've heard this before. If anybody has heard that from a festival, please tell me, because I want to know who it is. Because that's not the idea. Please tell me who has said they will only do
privately.
Yeah, no, I'm not asking you to say it anyway,
Yeah.
please do tell me, because that's really important. That's not the purpose of Without Walls. And if Without Walls was working with festivals that then only book Without Walls, then they're probably not the right festivals to be in.
It has come up a couple of times. So I
please
guess
do tell me, and please tell any other artist that, you know, that is not what's meant to happen. So I will address it with those festivals if that is what's being said to us.
So my question is kind of emerging artists. Obviously, at the moment I don't feel like there's much support there from Without Walls. It kind of feels more like a wall than for us to climb for the next so many years before we're in a position to be recognised, to then take risks, to then get those funds. Is there anything that you guys are doing to support emerging artists?
Well, I think Without Walls doesn't claim to be an organisation that is there to support emerging artists, but it also doesn't say that it's there only to support established artists. And I think if I were to look at the commissions and the projects that I've been supporting in the last few years, I think there is quite a mix. You know, and I definitely think there are artists that I would categorise as emerging artists that have been supported by Without Walls. So I wouldn't say that it's it's never going to be possible. But I think the reality of the numbers is that, you know, it's obviously hard, and I do recognise that it's much harder for emerging artists to probably, you know, get to the point where they, or certainly for them to maybe have built the relationships with the festivals. That is definitely very helpful, because of course, you know, if you've got one of the festival directors who knows and has seen your work, you know, that's not saying that you could have the most amazing idea and everybody might just be really captivated by it, and that might get through, and I have seen that happen before as well. But I think I do recognise that that's harder.
Is there a feedback process?
Well, this is something that we really struggle with, or I really struggle with, Because actually the truth of it is, there isn't very much of a feedback process. But the truth of it is, when it comes to feedback, there is very often not very much that I could very helpfully say. You know, because usually when a project hasn't been supported, it's usually not that that project isn't liked or that there's anything fundamentally wrong with it. It's just that the directors like something else better. Yeah. And in that context, it's not possible to really sort of get involved in anything that's extremely, you know, meaningful in terms of feedback. And I'm really conscious of that, and it is a real challenge because it means that every year, have we met before? I don't know if we have.
I think I was at the XTRAX meeting.
Were you? Okay. So quite often, and I really hate this, quite often my main communication with artists that I may never have met before is writing to them saying, really sorry we're not able to support your project. So it's like, it's not a very nice, you know, sort of way of developing a relationship. And yeah, I mean, what we usually do in terms of the feedback is if there has been anything that has been noted about that project that we think is helpful to pass on, we will always pass it on. But usually, the truth of it is that usually there isn't. And usually we sort of do write different letters to people according to what feels appropriate and what has happened in terms of that process of the evolution of the discussions. But usually, and it is really frustrating, there isn't very much to say. But it's one of the things that I would be really happy to talk about if you think there's other things that we could do that is, you know, that would be helpful. But what I don't think would be helpful would be trying to, and quite often what I've heard from some artists is, oh, you know, if I were to do this or that, would that have made it, you know, so should I change something about my project? And it's like, I would never want to say to any of the artists on the basis of a Without Walls discussion, change anything at all. You know, unless there was something like, you know, this is, you know, project costs, you know, $500,000 to present, which is never going to be possible, and that have been.
But we're always on the back foot because we're always in a guessing game, aren't we? But anybody who's applying for anything or going for job interviews or anything like that, but we're all in a guessing game. We don't know, and we're kind of, it feels like you're at the mercy of some people who you don't, you know, you know what I mean?
What do you think could be better about that process then?
It is difficult, and I appreciate it. It's partly to do, I think I agree with the shrinking market because the options for emerging companies would, for when we were starting out, was that we didn't get funding either for a very long time, or we got very tiny amounts from Arts Council directly. But there was an option that we could just plough on, get gigs, and just do gigs and survive off gigs. And basically, there's a slightly different criteria because we would get booked by people who'd never seen our work because it was councils, but they didn't kind of care, which was another aspect. But it meant that we got gigs, and the real testing ground was us in front of an audience, and that was what we were concerned with. Did it work? Did it not work? Did we get, you know, chased off or whatever? And we learned by doing that and home to craft or whatever. So there was that option that we could keep surviving and then keep putting applications in. And the more we survived, the more gigs we did, the more people eventually got to know about us, and that's the thing. And I guess that's what's possibly quite different now, because the feeling is now, you feel like Without Walls is it. And if we don't get picked, there's nothing, you know, how are we going to survive? And I don't know, that I'm not, yeah.
Without Walls is 8 festivals. I mean, I don't think Without Walls is it.
I suppose there's an interesting thing about the size of the pot, isn't there? Look, in the next couple of years, is whether that's new money, whether the Without Walls is new money from the Arts Council, or is going to affect the amount of G4A that's given to companies who've got quite different
If Without Walls starts affecting the amount of grants for arts that's given to festivals, then that would be a major concern. That would be an unfair responsibility to put onto Without Walls, and that would be a completely inappropriate way.
But
do we have a?
Yeah, I don't think we know yet.
From the Arts Council.
Who said that?
Angela.
Said what?
Angela said when I was talking to her about funding, go to Without Walls, they got all the money now.
Right.
Because if actually what's happened is it's the same size pot, but it's shifted from a G4A process to Without Walls. That's a different ball game to if the base that exists, and people can apply through that route as well.
It just
Well,
means
and-
the arts
and
must
actually, we're
advocate
only-
responsibility
But it's separate,
over
isn't it?
to...
G4A is separate from the MPO funding.
Yeah,
So it shouldn't affect it.
Yes, but I suppose the
Well,
question is whether it'll be interesting to see whether it does. That'll be an interesting.
We all know lottery funds are getting smaller.
Yeah.
I mean, that's in the public domain, everyone knows
Yeah.
that. So the cake is getting smaller, let's look it in the
Yeah.
eye, you know, like there's nothing we can do about that. But what we, you know, so that is the situation, it is getting smaller, and Without Walls has been given more money. So of course there is a degree to which Without Walls is taking on some responsibility for the support of new work. Of course it is. It would be completely inappropriate, and it mustn't happen that Without Walls is the only source of support. And I think that's something that I don't think any of the Without Walls partners would want that to be the case. And I certainly wouldn't want it to be the case. I think that would be really unhealthy for all kinds of reasons. So I definitely think that's something that we should monitor. And I think, on the whole, I think I will investigate what Angela said. I think there may be a degree in which that's an easy answer.
It wasn't a big thing, and it was just off the cuff,
Yeah,
but
I think that could be an easy answer for an Arts Council officer to make about why they're not able to support a project. Just as I think that, and I will investigate this according, we'll have a chat afterwards about what you said about the festival saying they only support the Without Walls projects.
But
It might be an easy answer for a festival to say. But listen, if that's happening, you know, we need to keep an eye on it, and I wouldn't want it to see.
It is also worth saying, in our experience, that we've had a project turned down by Without Walls, but we've gone ahead and found other funding. In fact, the Arts Council funded one of our shows. So.
And you have had a project supported by Without
Oh
Walls
yeah,
as well. Let's just
Well, no, we have, yes, but.
Yeah. We'll make that clear, everybody.
And I suppose I think we're very fortunate that we've got you sitting where you're sitting, because we will advocate and be fair about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I definitely will try. I can promise you that.
Maggie, can I ask how